Hi, I'm Kirsten, your North Sound waterkeeper, and I wanted to let you know about a contaminated site up here in Blaine that is one step closer to being cleaned up. The Westman marine site consists of upland soil and in-water sediment that were contaminated by past boat maintenance and repairs. Westman Marine is an official Washington State Model Toxics Control Act, or MTCA, cleanup site, which means it follows a strategic process from contamination to cleanup to monitoring. The Port of Bellingham first began to investigate the contamination at this site way back in 2001. And since then, a complete remedial investigation and feasibility study have been done on the property to assess what contaminants there are, where they are located, and options of how to clean it up. Some cleanup has already been done. In 2014, an interim action took place that removed 420 tons of contaminated soil. Then in 2023, a plan to finish cleaning up the site was finalized. Now in 2026, there's a new legal document available for review and comment called a consent decree. This is a legal agreement between the Department of Ecology, who regulates these cleanups, and the Port of Bellingham, who owns the property, to carry out the cleanup action plan. You can find out more information about this cleanup and submit comments on Ecology's website. If you have questions about the site, you can contact the site manager, Bo Johnson. So let's dive into a little history about the area before we hear from the Port of Bellingham and the Department of Ecology.
The Blaine Marina has some of the best views around. Drayton Harbor, the Coast Range, Semiahmoo Spit, all with the epic backdrop of Como-Colchian. 100 years ago, however, the landscape looked quite different. This used to be an expansive mudflat and native tidal lands used by the Semiahmoo tribe, a Coast Salish nation. Their life was oriented toward the sea, and they still rely on these waters for cultural practices and sustenance. The landscape was first significantly altered in the 1930s when the tide flats were dredged to create the marina, again in the 50s, and finally in 2001. The majority of this was done to create more space for the maritime industry, and long before the advent of modern environmental regulations and waste management practices. So, it is not surprising that past boatyard operations left the area contaminated. Most boat hulls are treated with anti-fouling agents such as tributyltin or copper-based compounds. These substances prevent things from growing on the bottom of boats because, well, they're toxic to marine organisms. The site is referred to as Westman Marine because that's who was in operation when the contamination and initial cleanup efforts occurred. Common practice boat hull maintenance work at the Westman Marine site released these compounds into the environment over time. Additionally, mechanical repairs done at this site led to contamination from metals, petroleum hydrocarbons, PCBs, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. The current tenants, Onboard Marine Services, did not contribute to this legacy contamination. Ecology's Cleanup Action Plan addresses the removal and containment of these contaminants in upland soils and marine sediments, while best management practices have been updated to prevent recontamination.
So I'm Ben Howard, Environmental Project Manager with the Port of Bellingham. My role in the Westman Marine cleanup is to manage the technical and regulatory requirements to complete the cleanup project. Landau Associates is the environmental consultant, and they're assisting the port with a variety of technical and engineering aspects of the project. The port is the responsible party for performing the cleanup, and we have an agreement with the Department of Ecology to undertake the cleanup action. An interim action was completed in 2013 and 2014 during construction of an adjacent building at Boundary Fish. Prior to the building construction, the port conducted soil sampling, determined if contamination was present in the building footprint. Soil sampling resulted in finding metals and petroleum constituents in soil where the building was going to be built. And approximately 420 cubic yards of soil was removed and disposed off-site at an approved disposal facility. And details of the interim action are documented in an interim action completion report. The tenant at the site has transitioned to new ownership since the remedial investigation and feasibility study was finalized. Based on tenant operations, they didn't remove the building, they really just relocated the administrative building. Well, the property itself is within the Blaine Marine Industrial Area, and the port is in the process of developing future access improvements and general area-wide planning. This property, the Westman Marine Cleanup Site, is to remain as its current use. The boatyard is an important facility within Blaine Harbor. And as with all cleanup sites, it is important to plan and address the potential for recontamination. So following construction, a new up-to-date infrastructure will be in place, and also the tenant will follow BMPs as required under the boatyard general permit. And a majority of the existing contamination is from a period in time when environmental regulations and practices were not in place. So today we have regulations and practices to limit recontamination potential.
Site manager's principal responsibility is to facilitate and oversee the state process to clean up contaminated sites. This cleanup is mandated by the Model Toxic Control Act, or MTCA, which is the law and implementing regulation that governs the cleanup of hazardous waste sites. MTCA requires a series of specific steps that include formal assignment of responsibility, whether to an individual or to a corporate entity, a legal agreement, either an agreed order or a consent decree between the state and the responsible party. It's important to define the nature and extent of contamination through remedial investigation. It's important to determine the most effective and cost-efficient remedy to clean up the site. And that's all summed up in a formal action plan that implements the cleanup activities. And there's also a public review and comment element that goes along with most of these steps that allows the public to have input in the process. And then later, as the cleanup process progresses, the site manager oversees physical work and compliance measures like groundwater monitoring, surface water monitoring, to ensure that the remedy is effective and protecting human health and the environment. The remedial investigation evaluated upland groundwater and soil. Groundwater sampling found no contamination that posed a threat to marine water or sediment, and site groundwater is non-potable with no beneficial use, so groundwater is not deemed an affected medium at this site. Soil sampling found amounts of metals, arsenic, copper, mercury, as well as some organic compounds, polychlorinated biphenyls, polyaromatic hydrocarbons, and minor amounts of petroleum hydrocarbons in shallow soil. The contaminants that exceed cleanup levels are concentrated in the upper portions of the soil column in shallow soil. The cleanup action plan proposes to excavate these contaminated areas and replace and fill the excavation with clean soil. In some places there might be a hard cover, an asphalt or concrete cap, and the excavated soil would be disposed off-site in a REC or a Subtitle D landfill. Sediment sampling in the Marine Cleanup Unit found metals, the arsenic, copper, mercury, and zinc, as well as organic contaminants, PCBs, PAHs, and TBT. That last TBT is tributyl 10. That's a marine anti-fouling paint used on boat hulls. The levels of contamination were greatest in the nearshore area of a marine railway that's used by the boatyard to move vessels in and out of the water for service purposes. The cleanup action plan proposes temporary removal of the marine railway and excavation and cleanup of that area, along with a combination of dredge removal and natural recovery for sediment in other areas of the cleanup unit. Dredge sediment disposal will be determined later in remedial design.